name is Brennan Peters, and I'll be talking to you today about Guillermo Gomez Pena and La Pocha Nostra. I would call him a radical of the times. Performance art at its finest. In 1955, the Prince of Anarchy is born to a civil engineer and a social fundraiser in the community of Mexico City. I'll be referring to Guillermo Gomez Pena as Pena throughout this presentation. During Pena's elementary years, he attended Vanguard's charter school. This is indeed a privilege to attend this school. Around the age of 13, there was a massive student massacre 5 minutes away from his home. This massacre happens because students protested the Summer Olympics. The government says the students provoked and shot upon the troops, so troops had to defend themselves. Witnesses say snipers were conveniently placed by government. Government said 4 killed, 20 injured. Eyewitnesses saw truckloads of hundreds of people hauled away, and their death count is still a mystery 50 years later. At about 2 years after the massacre, Pena creates his first performance. As an activist who becomes a misanthrope and chose to live life underneath the city in and around the sewage line system, Pena demonstrated this performance in a Catholic high school. The priest was not happy with the performance and ordered Pena to be evaluated by the school psychologist. Just 1 year later, yet another massacre. The massacre of Corpus Christi, where the Mexican government again shoots down student protesters, killing many. Around 44 people die. Again, yet more political drama in Pena's life, and so young. Corpus Christi inspired Pena to write a performance piece called Smogman, a superhero who stands against Mexico over the fight against pollution. Meanwhile, the mythical place of the U.S. is coming to more of reality for Pena's brother and sister. Roughly around 72, they arrive in the U.S. Pena attended the American Literature at National Autonomous University in Mexico. While attending the school, he creates his first collective called Anarquia. Their art is of bad atonal music, they practice ritual drugs, and they commit adultery. Sounds to me it's very similar to some Charles Manson stuff, but this was in the name of art. Pena excelled in the arts, and the creativity in his studies and his passion was so deep, it landed him a scholarship to study in California at the Institute of the Arts. Obviously, while coming to America in 1978, Pena is received with racism. The U.S. is struggling with segregation as it just came out of the civil rights movement. More political madness. Anarchy is soon to be awakened. Pena is let down by every government he is encountering. Pena no longer than 1 year later gets an idea and so desperately wants to express himself. He creates The Loneliness of the Immigrant, Part 1. Wrapped up in fabrics and ropes, he places himself in elevators. The representation signifying a painful birth into a new country with the new term, Chicano, being derived. This is the first performance ever to be documented in the art community. In the same year of 1979, The Loneliness of an Immigrant, Part 2. Balled up in a blanket-like material, Pena spends over 12 hours on the downtown streets of LA, surrounded by candles. Almost all the people ignore him. Pena discovers the ability of invisibility. Representing a homeless person, he becomes invisible to the Caucasian people. He realizes he wants his art to be more noticeable. Pena was not just happy with performing art or performance art. He wanted to touch you, not just himself. He wanted to make his opinion known. He was going to start making spectacles. They started small. Still, in the same year of 1979, Pena becomes the entertainment of the toilet, where he would sit in a public bathroom and read poetry out loud for the people that entered to use it. This was Pena's first time at creating a spectacle on a very low level. It was the beginning of something greater. He was performing for involuntary audiences. Have you done that? Do you know what it feels like to perform for people that don't want you to perform? And with the political letdowns up until now, and the educational genius, which is Pena himself, we can only wonder what's to come. In 1982, Pena graduates from the Institute of the Arts. A year later, he is running the cultural department of La Prensa San Diego, whose goal was to provide impactful stories to empower the Latino community. More anarchy is boiling in the mind of Pena as he sees his community in San Diego, which propels him to start BAW/TAF, Border Arts Workshop. The sole objective of Border Arts Workshop was to explore U.S.-Mexico borders, the issues using art and demonstrations. One performance in 1985 had the audience crossing illegally to exchange goods and love, and also confront the Border Patrol in character. As you can see, Pena will not let anything stop him from demonstrating his opinion. Also in 1985, two major earthquakes happened in Mexico City within 24 hours of each other, killing over 100,000 people. Pena and Pena's nephew and neighbors, they helped carry corpses from the police station to the morgue, presenting a powerful civic society, and a new culture emerged from the debris. In 1986, Pena became obsessed with photography. He started working with an artist by the name of Emily Hicks. They created a series of border art together, known as Documented, Undocumented. For a month, they staged pilgrimages between borders U.S.-Mexico and U.S.-Canada. During the pilgrimage, they would beg for money and costume, offer photographs with witches and shamans, and broadcast bilingual poetry. Around 1987, Pena had attempted several times to cross the border in costume, only to fail many times. In 1988, Pena and Emily are married at the border. And obviously, it is not a normal wedding. Yet another spectacle in Pena's mind has been arranged. The border is filled with poets and musicians, hundreds of people crossing illegally from both sides of the family during the ceremony. The world labels it as a masterpiece of political symbolism. Pena's only son would arrive 2 months after, which is probably why they chose to get married in the first place. Who knows? A few months after Guillermo Emiliano was born, Pena's father dies. Again, another tragic event that pushes the mind of Pena, once again this time by swearing and doing the performance of wearing his father's clothes for 1 year. In '89, Pena went on the road for 2 years, going state to state, performing a performance called Border Brujo, meaning witch. Also in '89, Pena receives the Prix de la Parole at the International Theatre of Americas in Montreal, Canada. He also received the New York Bessie Award the very same year. Around '91, Pena moves to New York with a colleague to start working on a first part of a trilogy labeled The Rediscovery of America by the Warrior of Gringos Troika. Pena becomes the first Chicano/Mexicano to receive a MacArthur Fellowship. The MacArthur Fellowship is an $800,000, no-strings-attached award to extraordinarily talented and creative individuals as an investment in their potential. In 1990, Pena meets artist Coco Fusco. They start to perform border art together. Around '93, Coco and Pena lock themselves in a gilded cage. They are hand-fed by fake museum employees, and they are taken to restrooms on leashes. About 40% of the people believe the exhibits to be real, but do nothing about it. The craziest audience response was from an Argentinian man who threw acid on Pena during the Buenos Aires performance. Later in the year, Coco and Pena toured New World Order performance where reverse segregation was in place. Here it seems like Theater of the Cruelty. The audience of people is definitely feeling some sort of way. Minorities are let in first, and Caucasian people are let in last and treated as if they were minorities. During the middle of the tour, Coco wants to go home. Enter Robert Cifuentes. Roberto and Pena mess around with pirating radio for a couple years. Pena also meets Native American artist James Luna. They both have activations at the museum performing drastic performance art. Pena would be on the toilet with a straitjacket, saying his body used to be a Mexican. And Luna demonstrated a diabetic Indian, shooting insulin right into his stomach. Hundreds of viewers gather and watch the spectacle happen. Audiences are perplexed, sad, and don't really understand. In 1994, Roberto and Pena crucified themselves on 16-foot crosses around the Golden Gate Bridge, inspired by the two thieves that were crucified with Jesus, Demas and Justus. They begged the audience to help them down without a ladder. It takes them 3 hours to get them down. Pena's shoulder is dislocated, and Roberto is passed out. The same year, Grey Wolf Press publishes Pena's first book, Warrior of Gringo Stroika. Pena and Roberto start a new pirate television project called Nasastek TV, a strange blend of radical politics and demonstrations. Pena wants more. He started taking his demonstrations out of the museums and into the public streets. From 94 on, Roberto and Pena tour Temple of Confessions. For 3 days, they exhibit themselves in plexiglass boxes. The visitors could confess via 3 options: microphone placed at the knees, they could write on cards and deposit them in a little dish, or they could call an 800 number. The confessions are intimate, lewd, and crazy, from fears, politics, to violence, rape, etc. At the end of the 3rd day, they leave the box and replace themselves with wax copies of themselves. For 8 weeks, the last performance takes place in Washington, D.C. In 1995, Pena moves to San Francisco and begins tattooing his torso. Nola, Mariano, Fuentes, and Pena found a long-term project, which we know today as La Pocha Nostra. The object is to create a safe space for rebel artists' interest in collaboration. LPN functions as an act of civic diplomacy and the means to create a community of like-minded artists. La Pocha Nostra tries to eliminate purity culture and believes in no borders. And still in this day and age, they are considered radical acts. LPN is to break all chains of thought of superiority among anything to anyone, and everyone is created equal. LPN is a safe haven for ones that want to express themselves, to give you an option of voice for support. They welcome artists trying to find themselves, new ways to relate and decolonize, to ask questions of why we do the things we do, to understand why is the question. La Pocha Nostra is a community where artists can collaborate and find more ways to touch their audience through performance and demonstrations of matters that everyone ignores. Why do I follow that sheep? What if I go that way? Well, guess what? La Pocha Nostra is a community of others that went that way and found each other and toured the world demonstrating art that will shine light on blind matters and change the audience's light to alter forever, where thousands gather to hear, to feel the voices they don't know how to express. Guillermo, Gomez Pena, and La Pocha Nostra. You have done it. You will live forever in the books, a radical anarchist or a hero. Nonetheless, an icon of the modern ages. His voice and movement will be legendary. Thank you, Guillermo Gomez Pena and La Pocha Nostra.